Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more HOA stories. In this video, an outrageous homeowner association booted my car from my private property driveway and gave me a fraudulent $1,000 fine for parking there. Let's dive right into the video. And the title story starts like this. So I live in a condominium community where everybody has their own driveway area. The HOA decided that due to people illegally parking in the driveways or guest spots and then going across the street to a shopping center was out of control. They decided a new system was needed to stop this, and the solution would be to give everybody a pass to hang in their car window. Alone, that is not a big deal, because I know that places where you have assigned spot use that method to make sure everything is fine. What I didn't understand first of all was the reasoning they had made zero sense. Nobody was having issues with strangers taking the spots, as the lot across from us was huge and always had space for its customers. The only people walking from the condos to the shopping center were people who already lived here. The second major issue was that because of this now they were implementing the guest passes, and after 10 a week it was gonna cost money. I found it stupid that we were now basically limited to having guests come over. Finally, they were only giving one pass per household. So if you had more than one car, you would now have to pay for another residential pass, even though the driveways were big enough to fit 2 cars. It was a horrible system as a whole, but I had a bigger issue with it than almost anybody else. I travel for work a lot, to the point that I can even tell you if I'm at home or in hotels more often. It can be tiresome, and one reason that I got a condo instead of a house that would need more maintenance. I was in China for 2 months on business, and while I was there, that was when they decided to implement these new rules. I obviously didn't drive to China, so my car was parked in the driveway. The only time it wasn't there was when my friend would drive it about once a week mainly, so the battery didn't just die from not being used, or I think the battery at least, please don't roast me if I'm wrong, I don't know much about cars. The HOA were all local people who knew me and knew very well that it was my car, and that I was gone for months at a time and would always tell my neighbors. A really sweet older couple that would pick up my mail for me and store it until I got back. They also had my number for emergencies, which is what happened one day. Due to the time difference, I got woken up by a phone call in the middle of the night by the wife. She was freaking out and telling me that she went to get my mail and there was a boot on my car tire. I couldn't do a thing about it from where I was and told her to just let me know if anything changed. Mainly if it got towed away, if she could catch the company name. It did not end up getting towed, but by the time I came back about 2.5 weeks later, I found that a second boot was put on my car, along with the entire windshield being littered with notes about illegal parking. A stack of them being fines from the HOA, with the most recent one being on the top. They were claiming that I owed them $1,000 in parking fee violations. Not to mention the cost to get the boots removed from the car. Keep in mind that this entire time I was parked in my own private driveway, and I had no idea about the new mandate or needing to get a parking pass since I was on the other side of the world. I went to speak to the HOA, but they didn't seem to give a single damn. They even admitted to knowing that I was out of the country, but claimed that it was no excuse. They did have the legal right to implement the parking passes, don't get me wrong. However, I felt like it was totally unfair that they were abusing the system to fine me with a ton of money. I was not gonna pay them a cent for what they did to my car or pay to get the boot removed. I set up a meeting with the HOA president and decided that if they were gonna screw with me, I was not gonna mess around. What came out of my mouth to them might have made me seem like a little bit of a Karen, but I didn't care. I was in the right and I knew it. HOA president, the boots will remain on the car until the fees are paid for. You did not have a parking pass on the car. Me, because I was away on business, which you were well aware of. I have no issue getting my pass and putting it in my car, but I'm not paying you anything for having my own car parked in my own driveway. I pay for everything on time and I have a right to park there. HOA president, if you look in the bylaws, me, yes, it shows you have the right to make us use the passes, but if you don't remove the fines and get those damn boots off my car, I'm going to the local news and telling them what you did. Then I'm going to the police to tell them that you basically stole my car and you are holding it hostage. The talk of the news and police scared the HOA president. HOA guy, we don't need to make a huge deal out of it now. We can just get your pass and call the whole thing a misunderstanding. I knew it wasn't because they did it on purpose, and I can tell you exactly why. They saw an opportunity to use my car to make a point to everybody else to show that they had to follow the rules or they would end up with their car booted and $1,000 in the hole to the HOA. They wanted to show that they had power. If the HOA was a worse one, then I could have easily ended up in court and having to make a big deal about the entire thing instead of them just rolling over. The boots were removed in the end and the fines were waived. Plus now, instead of being feared or whatever they were going for, they were now being hated. Everybody knew what they had done and taken advantage of me for not being there. They were officially labeled as having no care or compassion for the people they were supposed to be serving. Before this, nobody really had a problem with them, they shot themselves in the foot. I want to end this story with a question that has been going through my mind since the beginning of all of this. Should an HOA be allowed to have this kind of power? To boot a car and make it so the owner cannot do anything about it? This was about 6 months ago and I still have pictures of the fines and car if I choose to go to the news about it. Part of me wants to see how people online react first and if I made a bigger deal of it than I should have. Or if they do need to get blasted for what they did to me, I worry about other people living here and if the HOA will do something even crazier next time. And yeah, Ripestars, I'm curious, if you would have been in OP's situation, what would you have done? Would you have blasted the HOA wherever you could? To basically ruin their reputation forever? Let us know what you would have done in the comments. The next one is titled Rental Property Drama. After posting my HOA board gutting story, I figured it was time to share another story that happened only a few months ago and shows that some good can come from HOAs that don't have power-drunk buffoons running them. During my tenure, I've seen all sorts of weird appeals and issues that we had to resolve, from pond management problems to neighborly disputes. The issue is, this story however centers around a specific renter in our neighborhood along with their terrible management company. Main story: at the end of every quarterly meeting that we have for the community, members have a chance to stay back and review issues with the board case by case. Typically, this consists of community members who have fines that want to appeal or settle. This time, however, a regular attendee came in which surprised all of us. She had never once had a fine, helped with some committees, and had 2 amazing kids, one of which was special needs, important later. She sat down and calmly set down a folder in front of us, and that is when I knew she was serious. Then she began to explain how she needed help from the board with an issue with her neighbor. She described in painful detail about how her neighbor had been digging up and taking her flowers and kept flipping around the basketball hoop that her special needs son used regularly. She had even installed a camera and had video evidence proof, which she showed to us. Immediately, I became concerned and told her to call the police immediately. She looked down and informed us that she had, and the police told her to go through the HOA first. While that still made no sense to me, I said that we could look into how we could help. She thanked us with teary eyes and left after that. I walked out of the meeting, scratching my head on how I could help without even really knowing what I could do. When I got home, I looked up the address of the neighbor that was bothering her to discover that the house belonged to a renter and property owner that had a long history of issues with the HOA. While I'm not really allowed to discuss specifics here, let's just say that the property has had 10 tenants in 7 years and still has some serious outstanding issues with the board. I looked up the property company and discovered that they owned over 50 houses across multiple towns in my area and had a D- rating with the BBB. I contacted my other board members and asked their opinion on the situation while providing them with the findings of my research. One of them reminded me that the management company had sent a representative to the meeting prior and tried to appeal a whole host of fines with the excuse that they simply didn't want to pay them. I'd honestly forgotten that was the same house, not to mention they also tried to claim that since their tenants didn't want to pay, neither should show the property company. We denied all of their requests since they were years behind in many fees and dues. I drove by the property and realized how bad it looked. The grass was over a foot high, there were dog chains in the front, and their flowers were of course immaculate, and the neighboring houses were missing. I saw the basketball hoop flipped around for myself and couldn't help but let my jaw drop. I couldn't imagine how that lady felt for the atrocities that she had to deal with having neighbors like that. I took some pictures and drove back. On to my revenge, I contacted the board's legal consult and asked if there was anything that we could do to help, since the property ownership company had refused to pay dues and fines for over 8 years since buying the house. We did have the authority to foreclose and then put the house for sale through the bank that had the loan, which I thought was a little strange that corporate housing company would mortgage it given the amount of houses that they owned, but oh well. I did not like the idea of foreclosing just yet, so I set up a meeting request with the tenant. I sent the request for him to talk to the landowner since we were not allowed to interact with renters, and made my list of items. When the next meeting rolled around, the same representative from the company that showed up a few meetings ago was there. He stayed around, and when it was time for his individual time slot, he sat down and calmly asked what was wrong. My VP started with the list of fines and past due payments and asked if/when they planned to pay it. He replied calmly that they had no intention of paying them. I then asked him if he knew that means the company could lose the house to foreclosure. He looked sheepish for a second and then replied with that they had great lawyers since they had dealt with this through other neighborhoods. We tried to reason with him a bit more, but it was clear that they thought that they were above the community standards and owed us nothing. I personally like to wait 10 years before finally deciding to foreclose on a delinquent house, since no account has ever had that long of a history with their HOA, as we are usually able to resolve the issue. HOAs need to use that authority extremely carefully. But since this was clearly never gonna be resolved, the board voted to start the proceedings to foreclose on the property. I reached out to the other HOAs where the company held property and found out 2 of them were doing the same thing. While it's currently an ongoing case, there's a chance that we can also file a class action lawsuit against the company for property negligence. We'll see what happens, but I would love to run them out of business since all they do is get bad renters, ruin houses and ignore HOA rules. I also got into contact with our community police contact and informed him of the flower stealing and trespassing, and he was stunned to hear that the department had turned this lady away and offered to help. She reached out to me a few days ago to let me know that there is now an investigation into the matter and that she is trying to sue him for stealing property. I offered to testify if it ever came to that, and I'm sure that she will win. Moral of the story: be nice to your neighbors, and property ownership companies are terrible for communities. Update to the story: 9 months ago I posted about a rental property that was out of control due to a poor investment property firm. After a long legal battle, the board was able to prove to a property judge that the land was out of control and was not maintained. We secured a lien of 20% of the home for all of the fines and unpaid violations, and the judge ordered them to be paid immediately. Otherwise, they would face an expedited foreclosure since the property owner was acting in bad faith, and my state has a special process for these edge cases. As of yesterday, the company who owned the property declared themselves insolvent since 3 other surrounding HOAs imposing similar fines on their properties were included in the ruling. We cannot wait to recoup the damages, and we are working our local foreclosure management team to try to help guide the process in selecting a new homeowner, since any party 15% stake gets weird voting rights. We are really hoping for a tenant that wants to take care of them and wants to avoid another investment company with a poor record of house maintenance. As for the poor homeowner whose flowers were stolen, well, the board paid for the new neighborhood's landscaper to professionally install them after the current renter left a few months ago. The homeowner's property looks awesome, and they have recently joined our social committee to welcome new people to the neighborhood. While I have to keep it very vague, there are also criminal charges being investigated, which will unfortunately take more time to process. While not every story has a happy ending, the diligent work of this homeowner saved the community and others from a terrible homeowner. Always document these issues, since you never know how someone else may help you with it. And the next one is a petty revenge story. This happened many years ago. I am an IT contractor living in England. I got a job working next to the Welsh Assembly in Wales. Shockingly, typically I'd travel on bicycle or train, since there wasn't really a need for a car in Cardiff. One week I needed my car there for something, so I arrived early Monday morning. Between the Welsh Assembly and our building was a triangle of land that belonged to the WA, but they had not included it inside their wall, so it was just this triangle of unmaintained mud and grass. Big enough for 1 car parallel to the wall or 2 cars perpendicular. I arrived parked with enough space for another car. There was usually 1 parked there, but midway through the day I get called over by my boss, who asks if I've parked there. He says that his boss is pissed because I'm parked there. I argue over it being public land, etc. Well, I'm told that this boss gets the say on my contract and does not need a reason to end my contract. Fine, I'll move my car. Within 30 minutes of moving my car, boss's boss has turned his around so nobody else can park there. This annoys me. The following Sunday, I visit the local car hire company and find out that because of the miracle of the British train network, it costs me about an extra £20 to hire a car for the week. Well, off to Cardiff I go. Car gets parked there from 6 AM Monday all the way through to 6 PM Friday. Boss asks if it's mine, but of course, no, you've seen what I drive. I don't know nothing. This goes on for the next 4 months of my contract. And yeah, Ripestars, I can definitely understand where OP is coming from. Trains in Europe can be so different. You are in one country and it's super cheap, then you go to another and it's crazy expensive to go from point A to point B via train. I'm curious where you are from. How expensive are trains compared to something like hiring a car? Let me know in the comments. The next one is titled, New Neighbor Pretends to be Disabled to Park in My Driveway. So I live in Poland with my husband and we have owned our current house for a handful of years now. It's not a particularly big place, but it's cozy and in close proximity to stores, restaurants and the like, which makes it perfect for us. My husband works during the week and I do some freelance work on the side just to keep myself busy. I also clean up the house and do most of the cooking because I love to cook and I try out recipes that I find online. Everything was going great for those first few years and we did not have any complaints. Earlier in the year, we got a new neighbor next door named Karen. She seemed friendly and overall pleasant and used either a wheelchair or crutches to get around. I did not ask her what had happened right off the bat because I didn't want to be rude and I assumed she would tell me at some point if she wanted to. We welcomed her into the neighborhood with a bottle of wine and some homemade brownies, which she seemed to appreciate. I ran into her from time to time while gardening or when I went to run some errands. We would share some words and then part ways in the way most neighbors do. On more than one occasion, I saw her struggling to get into her car with the crutches, and one day, I approached her to ask if there was anything I could do to help. She told me that driving to the store was difficult because of her injury. She had apparently fallen while at work from a fairly significant height and had suffered injuries to her legs, specifically the left one. She also twisted her right ankle, which healed quickly enough, but her left leg was broken, along with some torn muscles. After a number of surgeries, she was able to regain partial movement, but some days the pain is worse, which is when she uses the wheelchair. That one moment had caused her to become permanently disabled. Karen explained to me that driving can put her leg in an awkward and uncomfortable position, and as a result, she doesn't get to the store as much as she would like. I offered to take her to get groceries, and she accepted. Over the course of the next few months, I would take her to the store when she needed it and usually planned my own shopping trips around her. It seemed like the right thing to do and I didn't mind spending some time with her. And well, her lawn had become overgrown and grass was peeking through the cracks in her driveway. I brought it up with her once and she explained that she didn't have the money to buy a lawnmower, and when I offered to let her borrow mine, she refused. It became hard for her to park in her driveway because of the weeds, and soon she was coming to me with another favor. Now she wanted to park in my driveway so that her car would still be within a short distance. The streets in our neighborhood have a tendency to be cluttered with cars, so finding a spot near her house every time was unlikely, and I consented. My husband took issue with this though. He always appreciated my kindness towards others, but he was concerned that Karen was taking advantage of me since her leg was still hurting her after having months to heal, not to mention the fact that since I was willing to loan her the mower, she could use her own lawn. I brushed aside his worries because I truly believed Karen and felt sorry that she was in such a tight spot. She had not been able to go back to work yet, and I thought that it must be driving her crazy to be stuck in the house all day. Even though he disagreed, my husband did not stop me from letting her park in our driveway, so that became our new situation for a while. There weren't any real problems in the beginning as she didn't go out particularly often, but oftentimes she started venturing out more and we found some issues. I had gone out shopping and when I came back her car was gone, so I parked in the driveway and moved on to doing some errands around the house, and when I looked outside later, I saw that Karen was completely blocking my car even though there was plenty of space to park without being in my path. I saw her approaching her house, and the second she entered her home, she tossed aside her crutches and continued on walking through her house. I was shocked, but convinced myself that I must have been mistaken in some way and tried to put it out of my mind. There was another occasion where I saw her stand from her wheelchair and walk around as though there was nothing wrong with her leg. At the very least, she should have been walking with a limp, but she seemed perfectly fine. I went out with her later to the store and she ended up opening up to me. She joked around about how she was cheating the system, and when I asked her what she meant, she explained that she took advantage of her injury. Karen recovered after a period of time, but told everyone that she was still injured in order to extend her time off. The biggest problem was that I now knew that she was scamming the government by getting paid leave due to a work-related injury. I considered reporting her, but I honestly wanted to keep myself out of her business, so I instead decided to not let her park in our driveway anymore. I went over to her house and told her that I didn't feel comfortable with her parking on my property now that I knew she wasn't actually disabled and could therefore park on the street with no issue. She became furious and began shouting at me, telling me that I needed to let her park there or else I would regret it. I saw through her threats and continued to stand firm. My husband ended up coming outside when he heard the yelling and backed me up since it was his driveway as well and had the right to make a decision about who could and could not park there. Karen just got increasingly more heated before pulling out her phone and calling the police. My husband and I sighed and got comfortable as we waited the officers. They eventually arrived and I think it was pretty clear who the crazy one amongst us was. Karen kept saying that I had assaulted her and tried to take her crutches away from her, but I denied it. She did not have any proof and my husband was there to vouch for me, along with a neighbor across the street who had heard the shouting as well and went to her window to look. I explained the situation to the cops and why Karen had become so angry, being sure to include the part about her faking a disability because I didn't care what happened to her at this point. They seemed interested in what I had to say and stayed a while longer to take down the details of my conversation with her. They asked her questions as well and I could see her become visibly distressed as she realized her scam was being revealed. There was a span of time after that where we didn't hear much about what had happened and I honestly forgot about the whole situation until a friend of mine, also an officer, came to update us. That is when we learned that an investigation into her scam had also revealed an illegal business she was running out of her home and that she had committed tax fraud on more than one occasion. If it hadn't been for me, they probably would not have found out about it. Thankfully, I don't think I'll be seeing much of her for a very long time. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.